Okay, so welcome everyone to this week's edition of Paleo Perks. So this week we're really excited to have Nick Gardner from West Virginia University, Potomac State College in the United States of America. And Nick's talk will be about save time, work smarter with Zotero, note-taking, reference management, and more in one tool. So a bit about the series and the format of today's seminar if you haven't been before, or if it's your first time back after a while. So we have a quick welcome and announcements for around 5 minutes, followed by Nicholas's talk and a moderated Q&A. And then Nicholas has very kindly agreed to stick around for tea time as well. So we encourage you to stay for that. And don't forget to send your questions via the chat to the questions at Paleo Perks host, who today is Isaiah. So a bit of housekeeping. Paleo Perks values the participation of everyone interested in the paleo sciences. Please remember to abide by a code of conduct during today's seminar. If you somehow found yourself here without having signed this, please take a moment to go to our website and review and sign this. Please remember to mute yourself for the duration of the talk. You shouldn't be able to unmute yourself, but if you find that you can, please remember not to, so we can maintain a nice quiet environment for our speaker. You can ask questions by chatting to the questions at Paleo Perks host or by using the raise hand function. And any technical issues should also go to the questions host as well. We have closed captions built into Zoom, and you can use the CC button at the bottom of your screen to show or hide them. You can also nominate all of your outstanding early career friends and colleagues using the link that will be in the chat very shortly. And don't forget to fill in our weekly feedback form for demographic information. So this is anonymous, optional, but very much encouraged. And this will also be in the chat window very shortly. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Nick Gardner. So Nick did his bachelor's in ecology and evolutionary biology at Marshall University in the US, followed by an MLS in library and information science at Penrith Clarion, and is currently the library director at West Virginia University, Potomac State College, also in the US. And with that, I'll hand over to Nick.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Nick Gardner. I'm the library director at Potomac State College in Kaiser, West Virginia. I'm going to be talking. I just want to make sure that just as a confirmation, you all should be able to see my screen shared right now. So I'm going to be primarily talking to you all about Zotero. It's a great reference management tool. I'm a huge fan of it. I've been using it for the last, I want to say 15, 16 years. But real quick, I want to give a little bit of background if you're wondering how I got here. I am the director at a small rural college. I primarily teach information literacy instruction. If you're not familiar, it's mostly basically teaching students how to find and use information. So that is things like evaluating information, organizing and managing information, incorporating information into an essay, assignment, research paper, or report. This used to be a much more straightforward thing. With the dawn of the internet, it has really become a very full-fledged field that requires a lot of keeping up. And now with AI, there is a lot more to do and a lot more discussions to be had. Typically, I visit the classroom somewhere between 20 to 40 times in a semester for different courses and help guide students through using specific resource tools, whether it's institutional databases or using open resources on the web, depending on what is appropriate for the assignment that they are trying to complete in the class. We're also here for one-on-one consultations. In my duties as library director, I manage a staff of 4, including another instructional librarian who focuses on our agricultural and business programs, whereas I primarily focus on liberal arts and STEM, as well as 2 paraprofessional staff who keep the day-to-day of our building going, and a professional math tutor who spends literally probably 35 hours a week working one-on-one with students from introductory arithmetic all the way up to differential equations. In my role as a faculty librarian, we are expected to complete anywhere from 5 to 15% of our time in professional development or in research. That research, as long as it is constituting peer-reviewed work, can be in almost any subject as long as we can tie back and demonstrate how it has enhanced or augmented our other duties within librarianship. Because I have a background in paleontology, I have continued, once I assumed the faculty role, I began continuing my paleontological research and have been heavily focused on the Paleozoic of West Virginia. With that said, I want to talk to you all more about Zotero. So specifically, before I go into that, I want to talk a little bit about reference management software. The value of reference management software is it helps you keep your research work in one place in a coherent, cohesive manner. One of the struggles I think that often happens along the research process, especially depending on what kind of instruction you received about the research process, is that students, there's just a lot of unevenness with it. We frequently encounter students, and I can say this as a STEM student, that I felt underprepared for how I should go about capturing and maintaining my research journey. And what often happens is that students view things, they get fixated and focused on things like citations and the mechanics of citations versus being reflective and note-taking, et cetera. And a good reference management tool gives you the opportunity to not only do citations easier, because let's be honest, no one really enjoys doing citations, not even me as a librarian, but also being able to organize and manage your files and also to keep your notes in a meaningful place. As someone who only gets to do research around 5% to 10% of my time, it is really helpful for me to have a tool that can function as a second brain, which is what Zotero basically does for me, and be able to go back and consult where I was seeing information, what my responses were to it, et cetera. One of the things that gets undersold, I think, for a lot of students, especially STEM students along the research process, because typically this instruction happens in an English course, hopefully in the middle school or high school, is the process of keeping that research log. Unfortunately, what we see is often the instruction given to students doesn't match what is efficient or practical experience in the real world. It's tools and techniques like keeping a diary, keeping a stack of note cards. If we have any older individuals like myself in our chat, they'll probably be familiar with these strategies. And the reality is, while they're good for keeping the information down and providing some level of organization, they aren't especially efficient. And that's where Zotero really shines. All right. So with that said, I want to explain why I prefer Zotero over other reference management solutions. Zotero has been an open source project that has existed for more than 20 years. Other tools like RefWorks, Mendeley, et cetera, I don't want to cast shade on them, but they are owned by large private companies that are known and say point blank in the terms of service, they are mining the data that you put in there. And personally, while I'm not especially worried that a company may be looking over my research notes and mining it for something, because if you find some economic value to Paleozoic sharks that I don't know about, that's great, but it still is a matter of concern. You're basically, those packages are free because you are the product and they are making use of you to things like track research trends and sell reports about that. Whereas the nice thing about Zotero is that's not what's happening there. What I appreciate about Zotero also compared to these other packages is that it is free at any point. One of the things that I really find it's important to stress for teaching our students is to give them tools that they can go on to continue using even after they leave the university. Whereas many of you are familiar with tools like RefWorks and EndNote, which often are free to university students, but then you have to go on and pay a sizable fee once you leave the university. And so whereas Zotero is free, has been free, remains free, this is one of the reasons why I'm a strong advocate for it. It's available for Mac, Windows, Linux. It has browser plugins that work on every browser. They have to continuously updated with major updates on every version. They're currently on version 6. And they just have a very good supportive community, as well as a robust network of robust set of plugins, et cetera, which I won't be talking about too much here. But just in general, there's a lot of great support for it. So that's why I'm a very passionate advocate for Zotero. So what I want to do is actually go ahead and open up Zotero right now. It's on my desktop. So you all should now see Zotero. And what Zotero does, now this looks a little bit overwhelming, but if you look here on your left side, it has this My Library feature, which you can see multiple folders down along underneath of it. Now, when you're in My Library, it shows you all of the sources gathered in one place. Now, if you click on a source, which is in this source pane right here, you'll see it opens this metadata pane on the side. The metadata pane shows all the information that would be needed for pulling in a citation. So it's very convenient. The other thing that I appreciate about Zotero is, as I mentioned before, it isn't just a citation management tool. It also keeps PDFs connected with the citations. So it makes it easier for you to go back, recover and retrieve a PDF at any time. The other thing that I appreciate about it is that it has a very robust note-taking features, which I'll show in a little bit more detail. What I'm going to focus on right now is demonstrating that it has both manual entry and automatic capture tools. So for example, if I were to pull up a source on the web, and this could be as simple as going into something like Google Scholar, and in this case, we'll do my favorite query, and I see this article that I would like to have in my Zotero library. What happens here now is I could go in here, I can construct a new folder, which we're going to just call Zotero Paleo Demonstration. And I could go in here and manually create a new entry. This is probably something, if you've used RefWorks or EndNotes, it looks very familiar. Creating a manual entry is very easy. I'm not going to belabor all the points. Basically, you can go in, retype everything if you want, etc. But what I really appreciate about Zotero is it actually has an automated parser for receiving items. And so what that means is there's two things I could do. I can download this PDF. And drag this PDF into Zotero. You can see it's now appearing there, and you're thinking, well, that's not really helpful because it just has the PDF file. But what we're actually able to do is I can right-click, and often it'll actually, mine is set to automatically do it. It goes and it looks to see, is there a DOI? Is there some other kind of persistent identifier that it can use to try to parse and figure out what this article is? It goes and checks against Crossref and several other sources like Semantic Scholar, and basically automatically pulls the metadata in. So even if you already grabbed you have a large PDF folder, Zotero is great because you could basically drop all your PDFs in and it will try to automatically collect the metadata. The other thing that I really appreciate about Zotero, and this is honestly how I normally use it, is when I am actually out searching for sources on the internet and interacting and engaging with them, built into basically they have a free plugin that works with any browser. I'm using Chrome right now, but it shows up here as a Z icon, and depending on what kind of page you're on, and for instance, in this case, I have this PDF because I have a PDF open. If I click that, you'll see it will save to whatever folder is currently open, which is this Zotero Paleo Perks one. And you can see now it's shown back up here, and give it a second, you can see it automatically went and grabbed the metadata. So it's extremely handy for saving you time on pulling that information in. This works best on publisher web pages, especially when they have especially in this, in STEM, because they're a little bit better about having, and some of the social sciences as well, because they're better about having appropriate metadata. Sometimes the arts and humanities are a struggle. But in general, it makes it very efficient and quick to pull this data in. With that said, I want to make sure you can see. So I always make sure different people do it different ways. Some people like to check over their citations in a batch. I like to double check my citations to make sure everything is accurate ahead of time. Now, Zotero, like I said, has an excellent parser and for citations. What that means is it takes a given style sheet and it then interprets how to turn this citation data into an accurate citation. One thing I find with students, especially as citation styles change, like we are due in May for Council of Science editors to drop a new edition, and Chicago Manual of Style will drop a new edition after 10 years in September. And so instead of you having to stay up on the latest changes, they are very good about staying current, making sure that their style sheet on the back end is accurate and up to date. And so in this particular case, while I could let Zotero try to like figure out what should be appropriately capitalized, I look at this and I say, hey, Northern shouldn't actually be capitalized. So I hit N. Now, I very infrequently ever have to really do this, but I'm just showing you all. It's very easy to edit. It's very easy to create manual entries. One of the things I appreciate, especially some of my research goes in natural history and I have to use gray literature. It's very flexible with date formats. So for example, if I am doing my research and I have an article on, let's just say, let's see, I recently pulled up. So here's a great article in the Erie Times News. And I say, I can see a scenario where I may need to cite and come back to this source. All I have to do, you can see right here, it's interpreted by Zotero as, hey, you need to grab this. Now, usually, depending on the quality of metadata behind the page, it can interpret things as a newspaper, blog post, etc. I find smaller newspapers, regional ones, sometimes struggle with this. So I click Say to Zotero. And you can see it's pulled down the information. I double check. Now, if I look against the source, just make sure. I check to make sure, did it pull the right title? Yes. Did it pull the right authors? Yes. Did it pull the title of the website correctly? I do know that this is correct. But one thing I noticed is even though a date is supplied here, it didn't actually put it in. What I appreciate about Zotero is it is extremely flexible. So we see the date is June 17, 2018. I'm going to need to make this full screen so you can readily see this. It is extremely flexible about how you put dates in. So it doesn't matter if you put them in a European style, like, 17th June, like that. It will still, you can see right here, it goes YDM. If I had put this in as 6/17/2018, it correctly interprets it there. It will still get the right information, the parser, as long as what you put in is a valid date. So if you're putting something in like June 35th, 2021, it's going to not like that. But that makes it very convenient. And so now what's happened here, and this is the other thing I appreciate, especially as someone whose work sometimes makes me have to use the gray literature. When you pull down a web page, it also keeps a persistent snapshot of the resource. So it's extremely handy. So I can pull this up. Doesn't matter if it's going to open an Edge here in a second. Doesn't matter if I'm out on a plane and I have no access to the internet. If I'm in the field, because I've grabbed these snapshots, I can go and see this at any time. This saves me a lot of energy versus having to print a PDF or screen grab or other means that one might undertake for web archiving. This tool works really well for this. All right. So with that, now, one thing I want you to see now, so we talked about how we could create collections. We talked about pulling in automated citations. Another thing that is really handy, especially if you're trying to do bulk work, you can actually, when you're on something like a Google Scholar result, so we'll go back and we will do Zotero graphic instruction, just like that. And say I'm doing a literature review of some kind, or maybe I'm doing a bibliometric analysis. I don't have to limit myself to opening each of these and going one by one. On a results page like this, inside something like Google Scholar, or even if you're using an academic database like Web of Science or Scopus, it shifts and it shows a folder. And so now if you click that folder, it pops up this little convenient menu right here and asks you, which items do you want to add to your library? In this case, I'm going to go and grab everything and hit OK. And you can see now it's going through the process of capturing all of these. Now, I personally don't usually do this much, but I just want to make sure you see it's a feature that exists. And you can see as it's going through, it is trying its best to interpret sources and what they may be. So it's managed to recognize this is in fact a book. You can see by that book icon. And if I go back and I now look in Zotero, you can see it pulled down all of these resources as best it could. If it could get access to the full text, it brought it in. If it couldn't get access to the full text, it didn't bring it in. So if you'll notice, some of these don't have associated PDFs or screenshots. Now, in a scenario for where some reason that your automated approach doesn't work, you're not out of luck. Let's take a look real quick at one of these resources. So in this case, we see that it didn't manage to successfully grab this evaluating a forthcoming international bibliographic research database in the form of a Zotero group. But what we can do is we can actually open that PDF. That's okay. And there's two things we could do here. I can either actually now click this save to PDF inside Zotero, or I can download this PDF and drag and drop it from my folder. What I'm going to do is click the save to PDF. And depending on the size of your PDF, it may take a moment. Often for a larger PDF, it's more efficient to download it and then drag and drop it in. So now you see this file has appeared here. Now doesn't have its metadata associated with it, but since I already managed to pull the citation, I can just drag this item up and drop it onto that citation. And now you can see it now has an associated citation with it. So that's very handy right there. Or sorry, an associated source with it right there. Very convenient. So even if your sources don't pull in automatically, you can always manually go back and do it. I've used Zotero, for example, when I was an undergraduate student, my undergraduate advisor, not PhD advisor, had a substantial paper database. And often what I would do is I simply queried on Google Scholar the titles of the paper. And from there, all I had to do was go back in. So for example, if he had something like Whitmer extant phylogenetic bracket, and I just wanted to pull the citation data in, I could go and do things like either click Cite, and then I could drag one of these reference formats. Zotero is able to interpret all of the reference formats that are exported by other reference tools, so it's extremely convenient for that. If I drag these in, Zotero will automatically interpret them. And so if all you need is the citation data, it's very easy to get converted over. The other thing I want to show you that's really handy, maybe you have an extensive bibliographic list. For example, here in this demo, I have a list of 4 citations. Yes, that's not extensive by any means, but it's an example. There are other tools associated with Zotero. One is called AnyStyle, and I can actually take this, copy my citations, open AnyStyle, paste them right here, ask it to parse them. It goes down and it breaks down what I entered as text into what it thinks may be the components of the citation as best it can. It's not always perfect. Now you can sit and edit these in AnyStyle, or you can just grab this and put it inside Zotero. You can download it as the CSL file or bibtext, but I'm just going to go ahead and grab the CSL. Or sorry, did that wrong. I'm going to grab the bibtext. And that downloaded that. I can go to my downloads folder. Or sorry. Now what I can do is while I'm inside this, I can go and click File. I can go and say Import. I can say, hey, I've got a bibtext file I need to bring in. And incidentally, if you're using something like EndNote or RefWorks or whatever, you can export your entire library the same way and bring it into Zotero very easily. So I recognize I have this any style document. I can tell it, hey, I don't want you to make a new collection for that. And then what it'll do is it'll just bring the files into this existing collection. It's a little finicky with it, but what you'll note, sometimes it ends up just defaulting back to the My Library. But if I sort by date added, I can see, hey, these citations that I grabbed, even though they were very diverse, one was a book chapter, two were journal articles, one was a citation. It correctly parsed out from that and put the correct citation information in. So that's very convenient. And if I just want to get them back into my demo folder, I can just go ahead, control select those and drag them into my folder. And ta-da, they're now sorted out the way I need them to be. So it's very convenient for that. Now, this is all well and good. You're saying like, okay, this is just a bibliographic database. Why do I necessarily care? Well, here's where the real power, I feel like, of Zotero is. I can go ahead and I can go, it's fully integrated with Microsoft Office, with Microsoft Word and with Google Docs. I'm just going to show you in Google Docs. What I can actually go and do is say I am typing this paper. Maybe I'm writing, we observed an outcropping and if I need it now, I need it, and maybe I want to add a citation, or sorry. Now I need to add a citation. I simply go in here, click Zotero, add edit citation. The first time you prompt it on a document, Zotero will ask you what style you want to work in. Now, for those of you who are submitting to Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology, you're in luck because Journal of Vertebrate Paleontology now is just using APA style or the American Psychological Association. You can see that there's a whole suite of styles right here inside built in, but you might be thinking, now wait, I want to submit to PLOS or I want to submit to PE or something like that. And I don't see their style here. Well, the cool thing is Zotero actually has built-in support for over 13,000 styles of both society or organizational style guides as well as journal style guides. There's a very robust and active community trying to maintain this information. It's actually very easy to build your own style guides as well, which I won't be going into because that's like way in the weeds. All right, so if let's say I want to add another journal. Well, honestly, I can click Manage Styles. And you'll notice here, it shows the styles I already have. And I just click Get Additional Styles. It pops up this nice little interface right here. And I can actually search the name of a resource that I'm looking for. So for example, if I want, and I always forget if it's with a European, sorry, I'm a little laggy on my end. Sorry, as I mentioned before, I'm on a work issued laptop, so it gets a little bit crunky because this computer is dying. So I just want to show, basically you can typically search and pull up. In this case, what I'm going to do once this stops delaying is, well, anyway, in the interest of time, typically what happens is you can simply just click on the style you want to bring in. It will be imported into Zotero and it'll be ready for you to use right away. And in this case, I'm going to show this as an example using AAPG Bulletin. Oh, so now it wanted to search. Well, that's cool. But it doesn't matter because now it grabbed AAPG bulletin. Now, the nice thing is it shows you when it was last updated. So it's good to check to make sure there wasn't a major style change. But it's ready now to cite an AAPG bulletin style, which has not really changed that much. So I'm not worried. And I can sit and say, go ahead and okay. Oh, go ahead and hit okay. Some journals will also have their own style sheet. And so you can click this and import in those style sheets if it's not in the Zotero repository. But now I'm going to hit okay. I'm going to go back to my document where I should now be citing in AAPG style. I'm going to tell it I want to edit my citation. Yep, I actually need to go ahead and tell it here. Hit okay. And now, right now, my default setting for this document is to cite an AAPG bulletin style. Give it a second. And now what happens is you get a very handy search bar that lets you search your own databases. So if I know I need to cite Farrar, all I have to do is type Farrar, or I could also have typed another keyword in. It shows, hey, here's this really handy citation source is ready for me to grab. I can just click that, hit enter. It automatically inserts my in-text citation right there. And it keeps a record now that there's a field in there. I can also come down and start my references page, Control Enter. And I can go ahead and tell Zotero, not only do I want you to put my references page, I want you to tell me to go ahead and add my bibliography. It is now going to put a bibliographic citation at the end formatted to match the style expected by AAPG bulletin. And so it has tried its best to match that. Now, I might need to double check because of how this was a citation that I imported in from a manually typed one. So it may not have had sufficient metadata. But in general, that's why I recommend just instead of pulling in a set of pre-done citations, you actually grabbing the metadata from the publisher site or typing it in where you need to. Now I can go here and I can add another citation. This outcropping was correlated and in this case, now you're going to notice I need to actually incorporate the author's name as part of my signal phrase because I'm going to cite Heckle. And if I just click it as is, it's going to create a parenthetical citation like what you just saw. So what I can do is actually come in and say, hey, I want to put this in, but if I click on it, I can actually specify and say, hey, I need you to structure this a little bit differently. And if you've used a tool like EndNote, et cetera, this is very similar to that interface. And so in this case, I don't necessarily need a page number, but we'll just put one in anyway. And because my author's name is going to be part of my signal phrase, I'm going to tell it to omit the author and go ahead and hit enter. What you'll now see is I now need to type Heckle because that's been omitted and it's ready to go. And the cool thing though, which you may not see because it's down here, is it has automatically gone and added in as best it can that AAPG bulletin citation for Heckle 1995. Now there is an error here. Again, this is because I imported this from the manually typed citations. If I'd used one of the citations that I had grabbed from a download, it would have been in better condition. Now, one problem that often happens in academic writing is the idea of orphan citations. What that means is that often you may have had work where you're doing it manually and you cited something and then you struck it from the text but forgot to remove it from the bibliography. What's great about working with a tool like Zotero is it basically does all that for you. And so what you can do is if I strike this sentence, go up to Zotero and hit refresh. You can see it automatically removed Heckle from my bibliography. So I don't have to worry about an orphan citation down there. So it's very convenient for that. Now, one final thing I want to make sure that I show you, next to the final thing, is It also has a very rich note-taking tool. In the last version of Zotero, they actually recently updated it to incorporate a PDF viewer. So if I open Heckle et al. 2011, it will actually open a PDF viewer inside Zotero, which I can either opt to click here to my notepad view and add new notes right here. And these could be copied and pasted chunks of text. You can copy figures and add them into in a note if that's more convenient for you. Basically, it's very robust. You can also do highlighting and import those as notes. And what's really convenient, and while it's a little bit, it's really convenient, is that all of your notes can be searched. And so sometimes as well, what happens is maybe due to the author didn't supply the keyword that you really need as part of your research, when you're looking at the metadata, you can also go and create your own tags. Now, I do a lot of this sometimes for natural history work where honestly, there's just not a lot of metadata and I need additional information. This makes it faster for me to connect resources. So it makes it very easy. But the nice thing then is you're able to search all of your notes. So if you had ideas or information you were looking for, it just helps keep it a very convenient place, and it makes it easy to track back what were you thinking, what were you doing at different times in your research, especially if you're someone like me who only gets to work on their research anywhere from 3 to 10% of their time in an academic year. I sometimes need to go back and refresh myself. Where was I? So it's very convenient when I can pull up and I can look at all the notes that I took on a resource. All right. One last thing I want to make sure you're aware of. Zotero also supports cloud syncing. Now, if you don't have now the only thing I will say is their storage plans. They only offer about 300 megabytes for free. 2 gigs is 20 a year. And their unlimited is 120. I will say this is actually a very unlimited. This is a very competitive price for unlimited cloud storage and syncing. There are other approaches you can take, such as backing up to what's called a WebDAV server. I won't be going into this, but if you want to talk more about that, you're welcome to email me. It's a little bit complicated in the weeds, so I don't want to like dive too far on that. But with that said, it's just really nice to be able to back up all of your information. What gets backed up are your PDFs, your citation data, and all of your notes. So you have ready access and stored that you can get to at any time. All right. So with that said, I hope that this has conveyed to you the power of this tool. I've barely scratched the surface of what this can do. It also has collaborative features where you can share libraries with people, including the ability to go and download PDFs, collaborate on note-taking, etc. It's just a very robust tool. It's free, it's been free, and it's likely to stay free. And so that's why I'm a huge fan of it. Thank you. And if you want to get a hold of me, my email address is right here. And I can actually type it in the chat as well. All right, well, thank you.
Great, thank you so much for such an awesome overview of Zotero. So just a quick reminder to the audience, you can send your questions via the chat to the questions that PaleoPerks host, and we will ask them, or you're more than welcome to raise your hand and we will unmute you so you can answer by voice. So we've had a few in already. One which is within the chat that I will copy for you so you have a again. So how do you back up your Zotero library, including the PDFs and links from Zotero to the PDFs?
That's a great question. So actually, Zotero automatically provides a backup to the web. What I personally do is I on my actual home computer where I do research, as opposed to, this is my Zotero instance that I use for demonstration, especially when I'm in the classroom, which is why it's very messy in several spots. I actually use the portable version of Zotero and have it on an external backup drive, and then I clone that backup drive periodically so that I keep a backup. I am a little bit of a Luddite who is just not always super comfortable with web storage. I have set up WebDAV storage before with this. It does work. Um, I'm just sometimes I'm a little technophobic. I hope that answered the question. Like basically, if you use their cloud storage, the backing up is automated. It works great. I've used it, tested it, never had a problem. Um, there are other backup tools like WebDAV. There's extensive guides on it. I'm like I said in the chat. If anyone wants to be able to contact me and do one-on-one consults, I'm happy to do that for free and chit chat with people. It's a great tool. I like talking about it. I hope that answered the question.
I'm sure the person that asked will send us a message if they've got any follow-ups. Have another question. Okay, so does Zotero have any exclusive features? How is it different from Mendeley?
So the one thing I will say is that it's well established in the literature, and this has been tested multiple times. I want to say over the last 10 years. Zotero has a stronger citation parser than Mendeley. Mendeley doesn't have the same community backing that Zotero does in terms of keeping styles up to date, keeping styles consistent, etc. And the other issue too is that Mendeley struggles with what I would call non-traditional sources. So Mendeley is great if all you're citing are the peer-reviewed literature, especially journal articles. Mendeley struggles with government reports, web documents, things like that, which increasingly, as the nature of our work changes and the nature of the way that we communicate as scientists changes, we're going to see shifts in that way. The other thing I will say is I'm anticipating at some point for Elsevier to stop worrying about providing support to Mendeley. The last time, I don't want to be, please don't sue me, Elsevier, but I feel like the last time they had a major feature update was a while back. I'm actually just double checking out of curiosity. They don't even say when they're okay. So it looks like the last time they had releases it was actually this month, but there was a gap between. And in general, like it just doesn't have. I don't know all of the features that Zotero has over Mendeley, but as someone who frequently like looks at different solutions, anytime I've dabbled back into Mendeley, I've just never been impressed with it. And also, I'm a little uneasy due to their connection with Elsevier of whether they would change pricing structure, whether they would just drop support and where that would leave people. And again, Mendeley just doesn't have the same community support that Zotero does.
Thank you. Another question. So is it possible to have a shared library or a method to transfer libraries from colleagues who work in similar areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't demonstrate this, but Zotero also has what are called shared libraries. The other thing that you can do as well, you just need to be mindful when you're doing it, is to make sure that each individual syncs and keeps an update. One, you can either share accounts. Two, you can use shared groups. When you share a group, the individual who uploaded the file is the individual whose storage quota it counts towards. So there's not a unique storage quota, at least not last I checked, for the group. So it's kind of similar to Google Drive in that aspect, but that makes it very convenient. And so you can be using that because you're all basically sharing and syncing the same document. you can be sharing notes, sharing information, et cetera, across. And obviously, I feel a disclaimer of, I'm not the copyright police, be mindful of intellectual property, blah, 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 things that we usually just neglect and don't worry about it because, yeah. I hope that answered the question, but yeah, it's very easy to do that.
Looks like we have a thumbs up from the audience. We have one that I think actually came through a handful of messages ago, which asks, can you save on space by just getting the metadata or later removing the PDF?
So the answer to that is yes, that is possible to do. What you can do, what it is it's just in the preferences. You go and tell it to, you can basically sit and set, you just disable automatically taking snapshots, automatically attaching. It's pretty much, if you just go into the preferences, it's right there under the general tab, very easy to see. You can shut all that off. If all you want is to keep it, if all you want is to keep a citation database, super easy to do. Just, you can shut that off, not a problem. Personally, I like it because I like harvesting and grabbing that as I go, but I can understand why someone might only want to have a citation database.
Hey, thank you. So got one. Um, uh, um, we have a hand up. Okay, you should be able to unmute.
Hi there, Nicholas. Thanks for your talk. I was the one who just asked the question about not taking saving PDFs, but I guess there's sometimes I'm doing a paper and I don't need PDFs for everything, and so I'd want to save on some space and just get the occasional citation. Could I guess based on what you said, I could keep some citations as PDFs and some just as citations. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. It won't go back like it. So there's two things you can do. You could basically set it as your default setting is to never go in and automatically harvest those copies of content, or you can go back in and manually remove the PDFs after they're saved. It's really what works for you. It's very customizable to your preferences. For me personally, the way that I am using Zotero on my home computer where I do my research, I use it as my comprehensive research library. And like I said, basically my second brain. So I really want to make sure that I keep all the PDFs that I have gathered over time put into Zotero. Now, I will be the first to admit, I only usually am adding things in as I'm working on them on active projects. I still have probably, I want to say, I think my legacy PDF folder is around 150 gigabytes. And even I still haven't gotten into importing and taking care of all that. And frankly, it's just an efficiency of time issue. It's not, until I start needing those, I'm less inclined to want to be grabbing and pulling those in. I hope that answered the question. Sorry.
We have one question that's come in, which asks, does Zotero deal with publications and manuscripts in non-English languages as well as English publications?
Yeah, so it's just a citation parser. So as long as they're following some kind of style guide, it can recognize, it can pull that in. I mean, as long, and then it's keyboard dependent. One feature I should have probably mentioned, this comes up especially in paleontology, this just suddenly, it just occurred to me. There's not a built-in support for italics for scientific names. So you have to use HTML tags like angle bracket I, in your citation entry to make sure it stays in italics. But it's a very minor thing to clean up. And I find, honestly, it often automatically parses and pulls this in without a problem. So I have non-English language stuff like in German language, etc. Some of the older anatomical works. So I hope that answers the question.
We have one more question before we close out. Do the PDFs reside separately from Zotero, or may I keep them separately?
Again, that's up to how you decide to set up your settings. You can do it so that you have your PDFs are not like linked in that way and they stay in their own folder, or you can do it so that your files live in an associated Zotero folder. What I have for mine is they go, because it's all in a portable version that I keep on a backup drive, they move over to the Zotero folder once they've been added to Zotero. And some of that is just, then what I'll often do is I use a different set of software to check for duplicates. And if it is now in both, if I scan it and it's in both folders, then I'll go back and remove it from the old library folder. So it's very customizable. It's how you want to play with it and how you want it to be. The software is free. It's at zotero.org. So I strongly encourage you to check it out. As I mentioned before, I have dropped my email in the chat. If you ever want to talk one-on-one about getting set up in Zotero, I don't mind doing it. I'm a big advocate of the software. So. Hope that answered the question.
Great, thank you. So I don't think we have any more questions. So I'm gonna take over the screen share. So thank you very much again for such a great talk and for answering all of the questions that have come in as well. And thank you very much to the audience for joining us. So please remember to fill out our weekly feedback form so that we can learn a bit more about who attended today's seminar, and join us next week, where we'll be joined by Isabel Dove from the University of Rhode Island in the US. And Isabel's talk will be about the nitrogen isotopic composition of Chaetoceros, resting spores, and paleoclimate application, insights from zombie diatoms. And up next, we have tea time with today's speaker. So this will be an informal conversation about the talk in a relaxed setting. And our question of the week this time will be, would you rather be a fossil shark or a fossil squid? But first it's time for a break. So remember to get up, walk around, have a quick drink of water, come back in 2 minutes. And if you have paleo pets with you, please remember to bring them too. We always like to meet them. And with that, we'll see you in a few minutes.